he's still listening to the show or watching the stream. Remember, I was having problems with my family last time. I don't know if you remember, but I was talking about how my mom, like, I gave her 4 years to, like, try and change the way we talked about things instead of, like, you know, she can keep her beliefs and I can keep mine and just, like, not bring them up. If somebody's going to impose their right, like, yourself, there's no reason to have that person in your life because, you know, a pool full of mud will sink you faster than a pool full of water. So just like choose your friends, not your family. That's all I can say to that. And if Jacqueline wants to talk on the blog, by the way, like I'd be more than happy to respond to her on the blog if she wants to go over there, the first caller.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if she's going to blog, but she may contact us.
So for those in the audience that don't know, we have on the freethoughtblogs.axp or /axp, we have a blog, and we have an entry for every show and some other entries for whenever the hosts want to publish something or draw attention to something. And so there'll be a blog up soon for today's show, and folks can comment on the show or have discussions about the topics on the show. Yep. Back to you, Mark.
All right. Yeah, I just didn't want to interrupt you, Don. So I actually had a topic that I was going to talk briefly about today.
Okay.
And it segues perfectly from the last caller. My biggest problem that I have with the whole conversation surrounding all this stuff, which is very important, is the whole tribalism nature behind it. I'm sure you guys are well aware of it. Whenever you wrap your identity up in any kind of belief or non-belief or in anything yourself, when you hold an ideal above yourself, it consumes you in your life, and it takes away, if they want to believe in their free will, it takes away your free will to an extent because, like, you automatically distance yourself from certain people who hold opposite views, and it's not good for discourse, and it's not good for education. I just have a really big problem with it, and I don't think a lot of people understand how much their identity goes into their belief systems. I think that they think that they know, and therefore that entices them or gives them the right to be able to impose those ideals onto other people. But I just wish everyone would take a step back to realize that not only was there a time where you didn't believe that or where your identity was totally different, but there's a possibility of it not being that in the first place as well. And, you know, those of us who were formerly religious before and have come out of it through whatever means that we have, I think it's easier to understand. But and it is harder with family because, like, you also have that linked bond, whatever, about you know, dealing with those people more than you would normally have to deal with other people, and I guess having to hold their opinions in higher regard, even though you don't really necessarily have to. I don't believe you have to either. My view of family is the same exact way of yours, Jen. Yeah. But,
well, and I would argue that in terms of tribalism and stuff, I don't think it's necessarily true that atheists, having come out of religion, understand how not to get trapped in that any better than theists do.
No, I completely understand. Like, I can watch out for it goes for both sides.
Yeah, we're still human, and we still make the same mistakes that everybody else makes.
And I wanted to say, you know, this is a big problem in the United States. We have tribalism for nationalism. We have tribalism for political parties, and you know, us and them, this and that, and it's just all over. And you know, religion's definitely part of it. Definitely in there in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it, like, helps propagate it, not necessarily creates it, because obviously tribalism was there before religion, and it just lends itself to it.
There may be some genetic basis to it.
Right. Well, our brains are made to categorize things, so obviously, if you want to naturally, like, look to something and you want to place it in its nice little neat box within how it pertains to you personally, of course, it's going to put other things in their boxes as well. Same as, like, you know, irrational fears of the dark and stuff like that. Yeah, the us and them thing, the mentality is just really damaging because we are all the same species, and, like, we should be able to have open discourse about these kind of ideas and theologies or whatever without having to, or politics for that matter, without wanting to tear each other apart. Because we are all people.
We can achieve great things if we work together, right?
Right, which is why I think that, like, things haven't advanced as far as they possibly could have, but that's just conjecture. I just want to remind people that, like, if you, like Don was just saying, if you work together, you can accomplish a lot more than if you work apart from each other. And it's easy to otherize people. It's super easy to otherize anything, any kind of opposite ideal that you hold, because you want to protect your identity.
Yep.
And it's also understandable, but you have to understand that that plays into it. So when you're arguing with somebody about something, instead of talking over the other person, just actually listen to what they have to say, which I know is really hard. It's easy to say, it's really hard to do, because we always just want to get our point across.
Right.
But it makes things better in the long run, and it'll work out on a macro level. It'll, like, kind of pay it forward or whatever.
Well,
but
I understand what you're saying, and what I'm going to tell you is that what you're describing is something that lots of people have put forward as a potential solution, and it's not a magic solution to the problem. And
partly because it's hard, right?
Yeah, and partly because sometimes this focus on, let's all be civil and sit down and have a rational discussion about this and not, otherize people, sometimes it works the opposite way. And I'll give you an example of the kind of tribalism that's damaging, the time when you do want to push people out. Okay? The Catholic Church spent decades protecting priests that they knew were preying on young children.
In the rings, Right.
And the kind of tribalism that caused the Catholics to close ranks around those priests and not hand them over to law enforcement, that was very damaging to people. And they did it because their affiliation with the Catholic Church, this idea that you have to protect this institution at all costs, was the thing that they valued more than the parishioners that were being victimized. And so I think you have to look at things like, okay, is the cost of being civil to certain individuals more than what we should be paying? Does it come at the cost of actual real human beings? And if that's the case, then
right, exactly. Yeah. That stuff definitely has to be added into the equation. I just think that, like, a more of a mindfulness about it as opposed to an actual action. Because, like, what you're talking about with, like, the priests, like, I'm in total agreement with you, and it goes far beyond that. There's, like, a history of otherization when it comes to, like, that kind of stuff. I know I talked about with Don before how, like, atheists were slain, or other people who had other religions were slain by the major religion at that time just because they didn't believe, and it's backed up by their holy books. But I mean, like, part of their identity, when your identity is invested into something, it becomes a part of you, and you become a part of it. So it kind of feels like you can't imagine yourself apart from it. And like you said, we can see this argument for anything. You can see it for veganism versus vegetarianism. You know what I mean? Like, any kind of group, once you become a part of a group, you're going to not, point out your own flaws, but you're going to point out everybody else's because it affirms you.
Yep.
And the more affirmed that you feel, and the more people around you that in your echo chamber that reaffirm your beliefs, the harder they are to strip away from you, which is why, like, scrutiny and skepticism is such an important part of, like, that process.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I agree that we have to be on guard against the kind of destructive tribalism that you're talking about. I would also say that we should be cautious about anybody that's saying, that there's sort of a magic formula for avoiding it.
I don't think there is a magic formula. I just think it's something that people need to be aware of.
I think people are aware of it. But the awareness, the awareness alone is not sufficient to guard against it.
Like, I mean, when I was talking to you before, I told you how, like, I had actually broken down my mom through dialogue to get to her to admit that she doesn't have a reason for believing in God. She just does because she wants to and makes her feel good.
Right.
And after that, there was, like, no point in arguing anymore because I knew that her position was steadfast, and it was only because she was so tied up in it to where logic goes out the window and there's no way to get around it anymore.
Yeah.
And you're right, there is no solution, and things constantly change and evolve over time, and there's no way to tell where things are going to end up. But I mean, we can do our best to treat each other with respect, unless, like, you know, they're not deserving of it, which would be the case with the priests in that case.
Yeah. Well, and that's you know, one of the things I've told the story about my family. I mean, at some point, my father, who was very invested in his religious beliefs, to the point where he was pursuing becoming a minister, and you know, at some point he realized that his relationship with me was more important than, you know, us basically butting heads over this area that we disagreed with.
That's very mature.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, you know, he didn't talk about it. He would, of course, extend an invitation, you know, to go to their church if I wanted to. But if I declined, it wasn't something that he pushed for. And, you know, it was just, it was not a topic of conversation he wanted to have, and I respected that. And, you know, our relationship continued, you know, as if that area of disagreement didn't exist. And so that to me is, you know, an example of someone who says, hey, I'm not so invested in this that I'm willing to sacrifice an actual relationship, you know, with someone I care about, just for this belief. And I think that's kind of, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of came to that conclusion with my father as well, even though he tends to blow up on occasion, like this weekend because it was Easter. I think it's more because of the fact that he's like so proud of me and what I've become and accomplished, that like since I'm separate from his religion, he completely feels like he failed me or whatever, and that I could be so much more. And like he's always worried about like my soul and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
No, it's just, you know, that's part of their indoctrination, which I'm sure you know.
Right.
Nothing you can do about that.
I was indoctrinated myself.
Yeah. And you know, and it's not your responsibility to deal with that. It's his responsibility to handle whatever his indoctrination's doing to him.
Yeah, that's why I just told him I don't want to talk about it. I just reminded him, like, listen, like, we're not going to get anywhere with this, so let's just drop it and talk about something else.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot more in common than we do apart, and focusing on the things that separate us is only going to separate us further and create some kind of resentment or, you know, residual gap between us. So I think he overall gets it. I think he just, like, is a little disheartened by it, but I can't control his feelings. In that matter, I can only, like, be the best person I can be and hope that he stops worrying with time. But I don't know if that's going to necessarily happen because he's like so wrapped up in it. Because you can't talk, I've tried to talk to him before about like the actual historicity of events and like where the different religions evolved from and where their starting points were known to have come from and the people who were involved. You know what I mean? Like the actual history and fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like that kind of stuff, like married with presuppositionalism, like and apologetics, there's no way out of it because they're just going to start from their end point and, you know, fit everything else to fit their narrative. So but you have to like learn how to recognize that early on and know that that's what they're doing. And just, I mean, you guys are great at that and like stopping like ongoing conversations when they're going to like the Carl Gregory. Oh man, like saying that he thought that his views aligned closely to atheism was kind of like a shock to me. I was like, maybe you should go to the blog too, buddy. Because like there's a big difference between like having a religion that we don't believe in as opposed to almost creating an entirely new religion and saying it's not like the others.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to your early point, you know, I think if people feel like their religious beliefs are under attack, they often, you know, dig their heels in. I've found it to be more productive to discuss critical thinking skills on other topics, you know, like ads. You know, if you're watching TV together, an ad for whatever, and it's like, okay, well, this is clearly, you know, make-believe or clearly, you know, an exaggerated claim. Politicians sometimes do that, and sometimes you can have skeptical conversations on other topics and get some progress there as far as critical thinking, and you might find that sort of has the long-term effect of eroding the religious beliefs.
Well, Don, what you said today, like earlier today, actually goes against that a little bit, but provides another outlet, I guess. He, like, if you talk to a person who has a certain belief, and I'm trying to be very, like, you know, general because I don't want to, like, you know, have 50,000 people, like, emailing you. But these belief sets come with a bunch of baggage that leads into every other part of life. And if you can believe that, you know, some mystical, you know, creature, basically, that, you know, there's been how many hundreds of thousands of proposed deities and religions.
Right.
And there's like 7,000 religions concurrently going on right now today. If you can, like, around it, yeah. If you can literally, like, believe that, and, like, that really hurts your skepticism, and it really hurts your critical thinking skills, and it leads into other areas of your life, which gets into stuff like politics, and which really is important because that's how everything that we live our lives is based upon. And when the majority of, you know, your belief system is wrapped up in that, and your politics follow that, it creates a really big problem. And that's definitely part of tribalism. Like, I know my dad voted for Trump, and every reason that I told him that he, not only that they shouldn't have, but that he should take a step back and think of what he really wants and what his goals are and what he's looking for in a president. And is he actually going to try and attain those goals, or is he just talking fluff to get in office? And and he still steadfast supports him, even though he almost he didn't do anything that he promised and went in further directions for everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It creates to that, and then, like, the whole fact of, like,
I would love to discuss Trump with you over a beer, but that's not the topic of our show.
Yeah, we actually have.
Yeah, I know.
We have some other callers.
Next time I'm in Austin, I definitely gotta stop by after the show. And,
so we have some other callers here, so I'm going to let you go.
Yeah.
But,
thanks for your call, Mark.
Thanks for your call.
Yeah.
All right.
No problem, Don. Talk to you guys again soon.
All right. Bye.